Hey everybody, it's Becky from Power Tools with Thread. I'm putting together all of the blocks for the Happy Halloween quilt from Amy Bradley Designs. And if you would like to start that, it's a big Snapplique project and you can learn all about that. There is a playlist on my YouTube channel for Snapplique, and if you are interested in joining us, the ghost video goes step by baby step. It's over an hour long, but you can break it into chunks to see how it is that we're doing this. Snapplique allows you to do applique quilts in a snap with your embroidery machine and a ScanNCut. Now, I put a basting box around all of my blocks at the exact same measurement. And if you didn't do that, then you're going to want to draw some lines on your blocks with a heat erasable marker at the exact measurement points of where you're going to put them together. The goal is to align all of the basting box stitching lines, and their corners are digitized to meet each other. Here you can see the basting box line for this block, and I don't know if you can see it on this block. You can see it easier on the back. The basting box line for each of these blocks lines up, and it lines up down here on the other end as well. And I'm going to show you how to do that so that they do align up. When you do that, everything is going to match. It does not matter if your seam allowances are the same width or not. You just need to make sure the width of the basting box on this sashing strip is exactly the same width of the basting box on this block and on this block. And the same goes for the vertical sashing. Everything is the same. Because I'm working with black, I'm going to use the old standby Singer white marking pencil, and I'm going to show you where those basting boxes are on my black sashing. Then I'm going to show you how to sew the sashing and the cornerstones together. The ones that I'm doing right now are the vertical sashing and cornerstones for the bottom 2 rows of the quilt. This basting box, I'm going to put my marks right on the thread. This is a chalk rolling mark. Here you can see the corners of the basting box. You need some pins. I like to use the long straight yellow quilting pins, and I'm going to take the cornerstone and I'm going to put the pin right in the corner of the basting box on this one. I've marked the corners of these basting boxes in red. I'm going to put a pin exactly right in the corner inside the stitching of the basting box, and then I'm going to take it and put it exactly in the corner of this one, right sides together. Now I'm going to hold the pin vertically with my thumb and finger. I'm going to straighten out the top edges as best you can, and if they're not the same width, that's okay. Just make them parallel to one another and hold the pin horizontally. And then you're going to take another pin and right in front of it, in one side and out the other of the seam line of the where you're going to stitch. I'm going to take this pin and put it right in this corner. Then I'm going to put it right in this corner as well. Hold the pin horizontally and pin it in one side of the seam allowance and the outside the other. Now, like on this gets confusing because there's a lot more seam allowance up there on this side than there is on this. That was because I skimped on this seam allowance because of the amount of fabric that I have. The amount of seam allowance does not matter. Now I'm going to draw on this just so you can see it, but I'm going to draw on the basting line on this one. I have a red line on the basting line here. I'm going to sew like a needle width inside of that basting stitch so that when I open up the seam, I can't see it from the front side. This was junk. I'm gonna start sewing back out here in the seam allowance, not up on the batting. I'm gonna sew the seam allowances together even though they're different widths. And I am sewing one needle width inside of that basting box. And I'm pulling the pins. And when you do that, you cannot see the basting box in your seam. And that's how you do that. But if you look at the basting box stitches on here on each side, they perfectly align with those yellow marks. That's exactly how you put these together. And I'm going to do that for every single seam in this quilt. And then I will press the seams open when I'm finished, because I don't want the bulk of so many layers if the seams are not pressed open. That's how you do all of your seams in this quilt. And now I'm ready to put this on this block. Well, everything should line up. When you are aligning nested seams, sometimes those nests can really give you a fit when you are doing these bulky blocks like this that already have batting in them. The trick I do is this is tedious, but it works great. I'm going to put the pin in from the front right into the seam where those basting boxes meet. Now I know exactly where the seam allowance is in the seam. I can't see it because my seams are pressed open. But I can, now that the pin's there, I can put another pin right through that same spot, and then I can go in on this side where the base, inside the basting box. Now I know that they're aligned properly. Now these things need to be held straight, and they can be kind of a pain when you do that. Sew Tights magnets are very handy here. Let me grab a couple of them, and I'm using the HDs because I have so many layers. So I'm just gonna put this right under here and have that hold that. Very handy, because if this thing is flopping down like this, when you're trying to work with it and it's flopping down, you're not going to be able to hold the pins horizontal to get your strip straight. It's very annoying. Now I've just got an extra set of hands. These are so good. Now I can hold the pin horizontal in my seam. Now I want to take another pin, and I'm going to pin directly behind the seam and directly in front of the seam, and making sure to pin those seam allowances out of the way, because these things will shift because they're so bulky. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go in directly in the seam, inside of the seam allowance. I'm going to take my pin now and go right there, same spot, and inside of this seam allowance, right in the seam. Get that straight, hold it horizontal, and pin just after the seam allowance and just before. All right. Did I do that wrong? No? Oh, here it is. I was like, where's my cornerstone? Now when you have long stretches, from here to here is a pretty long way. I'll just take a pin and in the middle somewhere, right inside the basting stitch, I'll push it through and then take a peek and see how close I am to the basting box on the other side, and put that in and hold it horizontal and then pin it. And same on this side. And then sew it all together just inside of that basting box. If you want, you can take a marker and mark where the basting line is on your seam allowances. I'm just aiming for it and eyeballing it on mine. If you hold your thumb under and your fingers on top and roll it a little bit, you'll make sure that the bottom piece is not being pulled through faster than the top. And if we did it right, everything ought to match up. And this is what concerns me most is the sashing, where you need the nests to be perfect, like that. Pinning before and after that seam is going to give you the best result for your nests on those cornerstones. Very, very pleased with that. So I hope this was helpful. You just have to slow down and take your time and use your pins, and everything will work just fine. Now, if you did not make a basting box on your blocks because maybe you didn't do the background quilting, or you just opted not to do that, you're going to want to trim your block to the size mentioned in the pattern, or to the size you established for your particular machine, and make sure that you've got them all square or rectangular or whatever, and use that 1/4 inch seam allowance and sew it all together. So hope this was helpful. We'll talk to you soon. You guys go sew something.